Hello and welcome to the Broadcast Newswrap, returning after a summer break with in-depth analysis and all the latest news. Another year, another Edinburgh, and as we cross our fingers for an in-person 2022 event, I'm joined by 2021 Advisory Chair Georgia Brown to reflect on the festival. And later, John Elmes and Hannah Bowler are on hand to dissect all the key takeaways from C4 privatisation to Jack Thorne's incredible McTaggart to some of the best commissions. All that to come on this week's Broadcast Newswrap. So here we are, the Broadcast Newswrap returns after a summer off. I'm delighted to welcome Hannah Bowler and John Elmes, who are with me. In a second, we'll go off to our Georgia Brown interview. Georgia Brown was the Edinburgh Advisory Chair. And sadly, we are not joined by our fourth Newswrap host, Jessie Whittock, but we are welcoming a new person to the Newswrap family, which is Jessie's new son, Joey Whittock, and hopefully he'll be making his first Newswrap appearance over the coming months. So we can't wait for that. So congratulations, Jessie, but sadly couldn't join us today. But Hannah and John, how are we doing?
I'm good. Isn't Joey already on his first assignment? I'm pretty sure Jessie's got him trying to find scoop. Yeah,
yeah. You got to blood them early in the trade world. So we're all very excited for the appearance of Joey. But it's been a long week for us guys. And before we reflect on what took place at Edinburgh 2021, I spoke with Georgia Brown, this year's Advisory Chair. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here, talking all things that I'm very passionate about, of course, including the Edinburgh Festival.
Exactly. So we're fresh from Edinburgh. It took place last week, Monday to Thursday. And I just wanted to ask you a few things about how you felt the festival went and some stuff around the preparation as well, which I'm always quite interested by. So I thought that's where I'd start, actually. How did the prep go for this festival, and how on earth do you balance running a streamer's European operation with also organising Edinburgh?
Well, I mean, look, I think you all know this. I am a long found, I've been such a fan of the festival for so long. I came up myself through the Ones to Watch scheme too many moons ago to think about. So I feel like I owe a lot to the festival personally. So when Stuart called and was like, you probably don't have the time, I was like, I'll make the time, because I just think it's so integral to the conversation. And the other thing is, as someone who does attend the festival regularly and, talk to my peers about it, I think there's a lot that the festival can do to be, more relevant and bring itself more up to date in terms of the conversations that it's having, because I think it is a great place for us to come together as a group of individuals and kind of share common thought, raise issues of the day and actually make a bit of a change. So the prep was, the prep. It was fantastic. We were really in the weeds working with Stuart and Campbell and Fatima. But I think what was great for me was it was a real coming of minds. We all came together and had very similar themes that we wanted to talk about. I set out the theme of accelerating change, and the festival got very on board with that very quickly, as did the incredible committee that helped put it all together. So we were very lucky, I think, from that sense. We've all felt, like a lot of the industry after a year of being at home and having such a tough time that, reflecting, we all need to do more actually and put our energy into the right place and focus ourselves in the right way. And I think we're already starting to see out of the festival an incredible response to some of the topics that we raise, which I'm very happy about.
It's interesting what you are saying about making things relevant. Is there a pressure to make the Edinburgh Festival that you're looking after like really current, and how do you feel like you went about doing that?
No, I mean, maybe there should have been. I didn't feel there was. I think, as someone who is so in touch with the industry, obviously, and living and breathing it, day in, day out, I always joke with people, television genuinely is my world, maybe too worryingly it is my world. So, for me, it was such a joy to actually sit down and kind of raise topics that I really very passionately feel have been overlooked. And, it's relevance maybe is the wrong word, but I think audience that are starting to come to the festival has changed, at least from when I started. When I started out, the first 5-10 years of my career, it was like the golden ticket. If you were lucky enough to have a boss who was generous enough to pay the money to let you go. And most people at that level didn't get to go. And where I've been really excited the last few years is how many companies are opening that up and they're letting that kind of younger generation of talent go, because it's for them, this festival, right? I mean, it's for everyone, but really these are the people that are going to take us on and carry the baton. So it's really important that we open it up to different voices. And as such, I was very keen to introduce new sessions, change old sessions. You all saw we kind of eradicated the controller session. We all made the point the controllers don't exist anymore. So we really need to come up to date, right? And for me, what was important, again, as someone who used to attend these festivals and attends them all over the world, there's nothing worse than sitting in the audience as an exec with commissioning teams saying, it's so easy to get hold of us. It's my pet hate. We're so easy to get hold of. Just ping us an email. And then they wrap up and they leave stage and you go, what's your email? And you spend hours Googling it and asking people and trying to find it. So, the fact that we were able to have the content chiefs up talking, myself, Liam, Anne, but then hear from all of their teams, the teams that you're actually going to be pitching to, the teams that are actually going to be implementing your show and work with you, holding your hand throughout the whole process, I thought added a really interesting, very fresh dimension. And again, it's making it just that little bit more accessible, which, as you know, is a passion of mine to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you feel that your experience kind of looking at the festivals from the viewpoint of a streamer helped here? Because something that I think all of us at Broadcast have definitely picked up on is it being so rare to see so many streaming commissioners like on a stage at the same time. Like in the past, it would be like if there was one there from a particular SVOD, you would be, all like cramming around that person.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lots of people have asked that. And I don't think I did that with my streaming hat on. Again, so much of what I did this year was just as someone who's attended the festival for 15 years and saw glaring omissions. And, we still had some obvious omissions this year, which I was really disappointed in, from the streaming side. I think it's important we all get together and hear what the industry is saying and come together collectively. But, despite that, having Discovery there, having Disney there, Liam and his team did a great job hearing from Anne, myself, Dan and the team. I think, again, it's about making it fit for purpose, right? Ultimately, we're part of the landscape. We're very much people that are being pitched to alongside the greats, the Channel 4s, the ITVs, the BBC. So it's important, I think, to have a more holistic view of the industry and see us up there together on the stage, right? It feels like, so much there can be an SVOD versus, but actually we're all part of the ecosystem. We're all contributing to the change or contributing to the problems that need solving. So we do need to stand up together and hold hands and face the industry as one, I think.
I wanted to talk about a couple of the other key themes that emerged. So clearly, 2020 felt very much like the year when new conversations about racial diversity were opened up, and 2021 I think will be looked back on as an Edinburgh when conversations around disability were opened up. Was that something, I think you mentioned in your Amazon session actually, that you were really keen to push on that, and you talked a bit about Jack Thorne's fantastic McTaggart. So was that something that you were really keen to drive, the disability conversation?
Absolutely. I think when Stuart rung and said, would you take this on? The first thing I said was yes, if we get rid of the controller sessions and make them a bit more fresh. And yes, if we make disability really front and center. And that's also from an Amazon perspective, right? We're not having those conversations to the level I would like. And I certainly know the other broadcasters and streamers aren't either. And everyone is doing their best. But as I said on my panel, so many people tackle diversity as a bit of an add-on to their job. And it needs to be a full-time thought and full-time thinking and really ingrained in the DNA of what we're all doing. So, having Jack come on board as our McTaggart was just... it was just absolutely fantastic. And I think, I don't know anyone now who's listened to his speech and not been just physically moved, actually. I think it's not a perspective we hear from very often. It's not something that feels like it's, those stories aren't very common to all of us. So I think it was quite shaming, and it wasn't designed to be shaming. It wasn't meant to make people feel negative or like they hadn't done enough. It was meant to just be a very strong call to arms. And I always say it, people always say disabilities kind of takes the back seat, but it's just not even there. It's not being talked about. And it is part of the diverse landscape we're all, striving for. So it needs to be included in those conversations. As you said, it's quite often diversity. We seem to tackle things around racial backgrounds, but it's more than that. And I think it's important that we start having that at the forefront of the conversation. But it's not just a quick turnaround. We're going to do X, Y, Z. This is, we need people to put long-term, robust strategies in place. It can't just be a reaction to Edinburgh and reaction to a news story, right? It's got to be more than PR. It has to be, as I said, deeply ingrained in every part of our programming output.
That's the hope, isn't it? Because you need big talk to kick off big things, don't you? And I felt like with Jack's McTaggart, it was almost like organically shaming the industry. Like you said, it wasn't something he set out to do, but is something that just clearly comes up via the anecdotes and the data. And I really enjoyed, there was a disability session earlier that day that I thought was really good. And they were also talking about a report that had just come out with some quite alarming statistics, I thought.
I'm so pleased you loved that session. I have to say, you know, it was when you look to putting these things together, you know, a lot of it's in the scheduling, and it's, you know, when do you have those sorts of debates? And we kicked the festival off very deliberately, and George hosted a brilliant session for us. And, you know, Deborah's, the stats that she highlighted, again, I think everyone was really taken aback because we just haven't seen that. It hasn't really been in the press. It's talked around in the periphery. And I can't also, by the way, say thank you enough, because lots of broadcasters and streamers and prodcos are doing brilliant things already in this space. It's not like no one's doing anything, but it didn't feel like it was a collective effort. So I think what I hope we've done is join up some of the conversations, and again, just put this at the forefront of everybody's agenda. So like I said, people are already doing some great work, but I think we all need to come together now and make a pretty quick step change. You know, and I'm aware, and I think we're all aware, things don't change overnight. It takes more than, you know, a few months to implement change. But I'm just really proud of the festival to, you know, be a catalyst for a conversation and not just reacting to conversations that have been in the ether. And, you know, so I think it felt very different this year in terms of the energy, I think, which I was very pleased with.
Definitely. And were there other, you were talking about the disability panel, were there other slightly maybe more subtle themes that you feel like we might have missed?
Yeah, I think we really wanted as well sustainability to become something that we talk about. And, you know, I mean, I don't know many people that did Miss Greta's session. If anyone has, I'd urge you to go back and watch it because it was just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, honestly, she's such an impressive woman. But you know, we wanted that to be a thread throughout the festival, and even to the fact that, you know, we were virtual, you know, and there was a lot of talk around, if we weren't virtual, what would we have done in that case? Because I think sustainability, you know, and climate change, not just in programming, but outside of programming, and how we handle this going forward is really critical to the future of the industry. Obviously, last year, the festival came just kind of after Black Lives Matter. So that obviously took such a central theme. And we wanted to continue that this year. But what I didn't want were, you know, sessions trying to solve, you know, diversity and on-screen representation per se. I think you can task a couple of people with having panels to talk about some of these things, but it doesn't necessarily add to a conversation that's been so thoroughly discussed through the industry. And what we wanted to make every session very much told through a diverse angle. And I'm hoping people felt that influence. I've certainly had lots of feedback to that. So I was very happy with that. You know, concluding with people like London Hughes, who I just thought was absolutely fantastic. Timing is so critical as to what you will talk about. And there's that constant monitoring in the lead up to the festival. You know, is there a topic going to come up? Is there something we should be discussing? Because I think the other challenge going in, and it was a challenge because I think we're an industry that we really love to focus sometimes on the negative. And I did want, coming off the back of what has been, I mean, look, I think for everyone, the most challenging of years, both personally and professionally, I did want there to be a celebratory aspect. And I did want people to feel some love and a bit of a hug, you know, something wrapped around, because it was, you know, we wanted people to feel, A, that they were getting value, that they got some kind of education from it, but also that they could sit back and just really enjoy some conversation.
And how do you think your successor can build on this and to keep Edinburgh relevant for 2022? What advice do you have?
I think everyone just brings their own perspective. I think it was interesting, you know, lots of my decision making, as I said, was just driven as being someone who was there every year and chose repeatedly not to go to certain sessions, or thinking, God, if only we had. And I think whoever comes in next will have exactly the same thoughts. I think, you know, we always say to people like writers, write about something you're passionate about. And it goes the same as a job like this. You know, you've got to look at the wider industry, the topics that we think are critical to our future, but you've also got to come at it from your own very personal perspective, because I think that's where you're going to get the most genuine outcome. You know, it was interesting when I started talking to the committee and airing, this is what I think. And everyone suddenly goes, oh God, we think that too. Why haven't we done this? We should change this. We should add that. So, you know, I think it's good to find that collective voice, but that always will come from personal experience. So all I'll say to my successor is, you lucky thing. I mean, it was the most joyous thing to be a part of. The team are absolutely incredible. The work that goes on behind the scenes, I had never quite realized the weight of what goes into something like this. And it's a real juggling act. So, you know, good luck to whoever does it, because it's just so much fun and really connects you to the industry in a very different, very humbling way. I feel very, very privileged to just be in the industry after having heard some of the stories I have this week.
So that was Georgia Brown, advisory chair at this year's Edinburgh, and Hannah and John are still with me, and we wanted to try and go into a little bit more depth around some of the big topics that were discussed at this year's Edinburgh, three of which I think we've honed in on was Channel 4 privatisation, of course, which no one can stop talking about, the international stuff, which John's going to discuss, regarding especially some really interesting featured panels from the streaming service, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about disability and the wider diversity push, and we can have a little chat about Jack Thorne's McTaggart, Georgia, obviously reflected on earlier. But Hannah, I thought we could start with you at first, because unsurprisingly, the debate at Edinburgh was really focused on Channel 4 privatisation, especially on that final day. So there was a big talk about the indie sector, which ended up basically being a privatisation talk. And then the closing debate was dedicated entirely to Channel 4 privatisation. You would think that was the only broadcaster in the UK. So clearly it's a huge thing that is going to get resolved relatively soon. The consultation closes soon. And from what I could see from the closing debate, it was sort of John Whittingdale versus almost like a whole bunch of people corralling together. So what did you think about the privatisation coverage at this year's festival?
Yeah, the last Whittingdale session was a bit of in the lion pit, I would say, is a good analogy of what happened in that final
he loves
final
it though, doesn't
session.
he? I think he relishes it.
He really does. I would say what I think was quite surprising about the discussion at Edinburgh this year is it kind of moved on the conversation around privatisation from a pure the sector's against it. It's all a nostalgia play. Like, we're looking back at these classic shows that Channel 4 have done, and think the arguments, I think, went beyond Channel 4. If there was no Channel 4, we wouldn't have this show, we wouldn't have that show, we wouldn't have, and actually got a bit more into analysing what Channel 4 needs to do in the future. And a little bit more critical thought, I think, was applied to Channel 4 and the kind of current state of play. I know Marcus Ryder especially said, we need to stop looking at it through rose-tinted glasses and start thinking, where are some of the cracks and what kind of needs to be done for Channel 4 to better itself, I guess. And a lot of talk was around the remit and how actually over the years the remit has been quite significantly weakened. So we're all kind of harking back to a time when the remit was really strong, but it's perhaps not where it once was. That's kind of the vibe that I felt from Edinburgh, which I think, quite surprised at from the beginning, because obviously the sector wants to save it, but so you'd think that every discussion was against, but I think it was quite mature to have some other conversations around Channel 4.
I think that's a really good point. I think that the shifting narrative was really felt, wasn't it? And Broadcast's Not for Sale campaign has been doing a fantastic job at highlighting the work of Channel 4, both past and present. But I got the feel too that there are changes required regardless, and that can almost help further Channel 4's cause not to be sold, because you can say, well, we'll do X or we can do Y or whatever. John Thoday was talking from Avalon, was talking about the need for the government to help Channel 4 into the future, so it to remain in quasi public ownership, but kind of like embracing like a streaming model, which I thought was interesting.
Particularly helpful to actually have these discussions to the government, because I don't think, the culture argument to them and what shows have done well on Channel 4 is not going to back them down. Like, that's not the argument that's ultimately going to win this. Like, you need to come down on the arguments that they're thinking about, rather than Whittingdale's not going to make a decision based on the cultural argument for Channel 4. It's beyond that. So I think this type of conversation and these types of debates are actually the way to win over the government.
Hannah's reporting, just FYI, on the Channel 4 privatisation during Edinburgh chat was because it was so prevalent. I don't know how many screeds and words you've actually written on it, but it just seems to me that you've written almost a book's worth on Channel 4 privatisation just at Edinburgh. So an incredible effort to kind of digest all these many conflicting views. It was one of the points that you raised in your piece when John Whittingdale was talking, and he he proposed about the suggesting that in-house production could be on the cards for Channel 4, and I think that's quite an interesting argument for one reason of privatization. Obviously, in-house production is something that big privately owned companies are doing, and are doing because they want to have the ownership of the IP and the value that brings to the producers. But it reminded me of a piece that's from our current mag that I wrote recently when I was speaking to Peter Langenberg from Banijay. This is the COO of Banijay Group. Obviously, are consolidated themselves and are quite a big production company. But he said that broadcasters used to think the consolidation play that's happening in the world. He said that broadcasters used to think that in-house production was the key, the golden key, he called it, to kind of ultimate success. But then they suddenly realized a way back this wasn't the golden key, and they still need a thriving independent production sector to help fuel it. And if you look at some of the big streamers who aren't necessarily doing in-house production themselves, call on huge amounts of the indie sector to do it. And if you take away one of the biggest parts of that, you're just going to be removing a massive chunk of work, creative license, creativity, and actual labor by saying this whole, oh yeah, we'll bring it in-house.
Yeah, like it's a fear that in-house will build up and then it will have an impact on the indie sector, but it's not necessarily a given that, say, a buyer with in-house capabilities would completely shift and there'd be less money and less commissions. Yeah, definitely, especially if the government say they'll guarantee it or put in the right obligations to protect it, which I can't imagine that they wouldn't do. And then John Montiel said there'd be a cap on it if in-house was going to continue.
Yeah, it felt a bit like that was part of the shifting narrative that you were talking about. Did involve John Whittingdale going into a little bit more detail about what a potentially privatized Channel 4 could look like and how that could still serve the public service broadcasting landscape. And incidentally, the boss of All Three Media, Jane Turton, in amidst the same panel that John Thode was on, said some quite interesting things. One of which was she was made a bit of a throwaway line, but was talking about how Channel 4 isn't necessarily not going to spend more money if it was to be privatized. I think this was maybe the first that we'd heard from like a big figure from the indie sector talking about how Channel 4 might be pushed to spend more on indies once it changes. So there was a lot of, or when it could change, there was a lot of nuance that I quite liked. The channel, I thought, Hannah, the Channel 4 commissioners themselves were quite interesting on privatization. There was a spotlight session on the first day. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. We spun a story out of this, kind of Channel 4 commissioners saying, coining the term kind of galvanized by the threat of privatization. And I guess it does make sense because your commissioning strategy and your output and all of those different things is literally being scrutinized at the highest level by government, indies, the us as journalists, and so all of that is really being picked apart and you're quite on the spotlight. And so a reaction to that to make you kind of step up your game and commission different shows. I mean, it's quite telling that I think Channel 4 were probably the main announcer of shows during Edinburgh Festival. I think I clocked like 16 announcements, which is far, far above all of the other broadcasters. So it's definitely kind of sending a message like, look, we are buying loads of shows and investing in new formats, because none of them were reboots or anything like that. They were all original formats. So that is something quite interesting. And I think if it's me, the threat of privatization probably would make me step up my game. Especially, I guess, the main things lauded at Channel 4 is the fact that it needs to find new returning series. It relies on imports from other channels and all of that stuff that really does relate to commissioning as well. Not commissioning from enough smaller indies, and quite a lot of small indies were among those announcements. So there's definitely a bit of a defense in that.
Yeah, and incidentally, Channel 4 announced 16 shows and ITV and Channel 5 announced 0 between them. I thought was interesting. There was some from the BBC and some international that we'll go on to talk about, but nothing from ITV and nothing from Channel 5. So clearly leaving all the commissioning annos to Channel 4, which was fun for you, Hannah. John, you were focusing on some of the streamers who were out in full force really at Edinburgh. Very rare to see such big cohorts from all of the major streamers, and I think spoke to what they want to do in the UK. So what were some of the highlights for you, John?
Yeah, so exactly as you say, Max, the fact that they were out in force tends to point to the fact that the UK outside of the US is still probably, without wanting to sound too jingoistic, the most important territory for the big streamers. We obviously got huge SVOD cut through, massive pay TV cut through. So, Sky is obviously a huge, in about 12 million households. I've definitely got that figure wrong, but, definitely over 10 million households, and Sky is often the portal for these streamers as a distribution partner. So the UK is still a massively important territory. It's not surprising that they were going to be, setting their stall out for producers to come with their best ideas. And within that, they all said fairly similar things in terms of what they're looking for in terms of the kind of shows, and I'll come on to that in a minute because it was quite important. I think the telling point that I saw was it was the first session I covered, and it was Anne Mensah, Netflix's VP of Original Series on the drama side in UK. Obviously, Anne is a former Sky commissioner. She's a huge commissioner in the UK, extremely well respected, well known, and internationally for that matter, not just the UK. And she put it out that even when Netflix does a lower budget show, these were still multi-million pound endeavors. And it kind of really pointed to Netflix commissioner talking about what they mean, the premium feel. I think people have danced around the idea about what premiums, not wanting to say that, a Netflix show has a bit of gloss and a bit of extra higher quality. I don't know what that is, a nebulous thing. How do you define quality? But that extra investment which you do see on screen, if you think about how lavish The Crown looks. And it wasn't an admission. It was just an understanding that these are super expensive undertakings. So if you're gonna try and pitch your really great show, you've got to be able to prove that you can do it. And she was calling on smaller indies to be honest with themselves about their ability, because they want to employ smaller indies, but if you don't have the infrastructure, and she even called a specific hire, like a financial controller. Obviously, people do all indies have financial people, but specific people within the indie to help make sure that an ambitious pitch comes on board and actually gets to screen. If you don't have that infrastructure behind you, then team up. Then try and find a partner to do it. And, Netflix aren't going to say, oh, well, we want to, just buy it from one indie. They'll be happier if you're combining it with a company that can provide you with extra resource or help to make sure that brilliant idea does get seen to screens.
Good honesty, isn't it? Because it's so easy for commissioners to say, we'll commission from anyone and bring us any idea. And actually the Netflix unscripted guys kind of said the opposite in a sense, didn't they? They were talking a bit about how they won't just take on big budget shows and it can be of a lower budget, which is, it's interesting to hear two from the same streamer talking kind of in opposite terms.
We should also, scripted productions are invariably more expensive. So, it's as you say, honestly, it was nice to hear a drama commissioner fully understanding that they're expensive, but also saying that because they're so expensive, they have to be right. Again, another wonderful bit of honesty from Anne Mensah. She said, I don't really understand what international appeal is. What is that? What does that mean? And she basically said this comment, this expression that everyone uses in the streaming world because they're everywhere, and that's what they want to show. It's actually pretty meaningless. So she said, rather than trying to pitch a show that had international appeal, come to us with the pitches that really tackle a theme, a universal theme that's relatable to us as humans and consumers of TV at its core. So she referenced grief and love and stuff like that. And then everyone who I saw, taking pitches was saying, yeah, we want universal themes. Ben Kelly and Daisy Lilly said it. Liam Keelan said it from Disney Plus. It's things that we can absolutely understand and enjoy. Family, love, grief, that kind of thing, you know, human emotions and human experiences that we really relate to, that tend to resonate above and beyond the super high concept stuff that is really fantastical and we also love, but possibly is a little bit more removed from what life is like.
Yeah. For me, I feel like gone are the days when broadcasters can constantly say streamers wouldn't have commissioned X or streamers wouldn't have commissioned Y, but they still do. And it was annoying me. I think Ian Katz was talking in the Channel 4 session. Hannah, we were talking about this earlier this week. Ian Katz was talking about how a streamer wouldn't have commissioned the upcoming drama Help, which is about a care home, which has Jodie Comer and Stephen Graham. And I just think we're very like beyond that narrative now. I don't see any reason why Netflix wouldn't have commissioned that. And I think it really taps into what you were reporting, John and Mensa said about international appeal, because Help is something that deals with a theme and it might be rooted in a British nation and region, but that doesn't mean that an SWAD wouldn't have liked it. It feels like we're well beyond that now. And was there anything else, John, that caught your eye in the international side of things?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that was interesting from the other, there was a lot of other streamers still there, and you know, NBC Universal content chief was Susan Rovner was talking about Peacock, and HBO Max were in force, and they are all really looking to the UK for their formats because they know that that formats from the UK are often really good because we're one of the best creators of formats, and they were talking up the idea of international co-pros. They all mooted it as as a model that they would like to pursue, and I think that they are pursuing in cases, but whether they'd pursue it more. One of the interesting things for me actually was it was a kind of an almost when people talk about partnership and wanting to be working hand in hand with others, you sometimes lose sight of what actual companies want and what they feel they want. And Lisa Holm from Discovery Plus, I thought, with all this talk about rights flexibility that we hear in the international market about sharing rights, she gave off the impression that actually Discovery Plus would be they would be flexible where they had to be. If they bought something where they could only get certain rights to certain territories, they'd have to do it and they would be forced a bit. But at the end of the day, if they're going to commission something, they can control a lot of the rights and they'll do that. So I actually thought that from a rights perspective, Discovery Plus were talking very honestly about, we're not going to share many rights, but if possible, we're going to commission stuff and we'll have that for global. Yes, if we buy a really great feature doc, we're going to have to deal with the fact we might not have it in certain territories, but we don't mind being a bit Swiss cheesy that's what her expression, if we want to. And I thought that was, that's candid. Basically someone saying, look, yeah, we want to share rights and that is important, but they're not going to if they can help it, because they want to own the content, because owning content is so valuable.
Moving on a little bit then, we obviously had the McTaggart again this year because it's annual. Don't know why I said that. And this year, writer Jack Thorne, it was his time to do the speech. And I mean, personally, it was one of the most powerful speeches I've seen of a McTaggart. I think he spoke very eloquently, and I think, again, because he's not a performer, his way of speaking just came over so like raw and honest that it was pretty mind-blowing. I know, Max, you cover a lot. Obviously, it was focused on disability this year, and I know, Max, obviously that's been quite on hand to covering this for broadcast. I wonder, what did you make of this year's McTaggart?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would urge anyone to watch it. And there was something about the kind of raw emotion. He says straight away that he's not like a natural public speaker and doesn't do that stuff very often. And it kind of made it better in a way. Like normally it's people who are very used to doing that, and they're very good too, but in a different way. So I would urge anyone to watch it. And look, I touched on things with Georgia around the McTaggart earlier. But I can see it in some respects instilling a sea change in the industry. Like, I think what I'm wondering about now is what happens from here. So there were some incredibly powerful quotes I thought from Jack, which relate to this. So he said, gender, race, sexuality all rightly get discussed at length, but disability gets relegated out. He talked about himself failing the cause of disability and spoke about incidents where, for example, disabled actors have their lines just chopped in half, like right in front of him, and he feels that he should have spoken up more. So really powerful stuff, and stuff that he's looking to change. So Jack also announced the launch of a lobbying group called Underlying Health Condition, which will look to set up a fund to improve spaces for disabled people. One, having spoken to lots of disabled people and activists over the past months, one really obvious problem is literally space and access. And Jack, again, used his McTaggart to tell horror stories of disabled talent who've had to cope with inaccessible buildings. One had to crawl up some steps every day to get to her desk. So he said we need spaces to be truly inclusive so that never again will people be crawling across the floor, denied a meeting because of lack of access. So that is clearly something big that production companies and broadcasters are going to have to work on. And it's a wider societal thing, isn't it? So you would hope that they can draw on maybe other more successful industries or looking into that. And Jack was speaking a few hours after a really interesting panel on disability, which was timed with the third big report that's come out over the last few weeks into this area, of which more than 3/4 of the respondents to this report, which is done by the Sir Lenny Henry Centre, said they felt their impairment had impacted on their career choice, and 80% said the same for career progression. So a big problem highlighted is indies and broadcasters requiring people with certain numbers of credits, and because of legacy issues with disabled people coming into the TV sector, they don't have the necessary credits, so finding it really difficult to move up the chain. The same with the amount of time between a green light given and the show, the cameras rolling, basically. So in the execs turn to the usual suspects, and again, disabled people get shut out. So that's something that Jack is talking about trying to address. And the broadcasters, to be fair to them, have put forward various targets over the last few weeks and months that have looked at this. But Anne Menzer and Piers Wenger announced a really interesting sounding scheme for disabled comedies and dramas. So over the next 5 years, the broadcaster and the SVOD, which is really interesting that they're combining in itself, are going to come together and commission disabled creatives on hopefully a whole bunch of shows. And that will address another of what I thought was Jack Thorne's really interesting points, which is around the fact that disabled shows are never given a normal, quote unquote, normal budget. So he's writing a show for BBC Two this year, which is his first to focus on disability, that will have a regular BBC drama budget. And that, he said, is actually coming out of the BBC History Department, but has got some co-pro funding. So in the past, the commissioners take little pots of money from other places, or these shows come from schemes, but if you don't have the full amount of money being thrown at these dramas, then they'll always be ever so slightly relegated, as Jack Thorne described. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I think it's going to be interesting going forward how disability dovetails with the rest of diversity. And again, I say that with quotes.
So obviously with Jack Thorne's McTaggart, disability was high on the agenda, but as the wider diversity agenda is invariably also caught up in this, Max, you know, in the industry, what were the other aspects of diversity that caught your eye among the panels and the various sessions that were on?
There was some touching upon the issue of racial diversity at this year's Edinburgh, which, as we know, was the dominating feature of last year's Edinburgh. But obviously the concern is that you move between the strands of diversity, you try and redress one issue and forget about another one, which takes much more than a year to address. So, you know, other sessions which are well worth a watch. The alternative McTaggart, London Hughes, spoke very candidly about the UK commissioning sector, and actually spoke very similarly to Jamila Jamil, who did the previous one, in terms of having to go to America to really find success. And Afua Hirsch as well, who announced a tie-up with Fremantle, is worth a listen for the wider strands of diversity. But I think trying to redress these really huge issues that need money thrown at them surrounding disability, and also sticking to the other diversity strands, quote unquote, is going to be a really big task, and it'll be interesting to see where things go from here. Right. So normally we come to our what we've been watching session at this point, often considered to be the best part of the podcast. But today we're going to think about Edinburgh specifically, and just talk about one commission that we're really excited by, or thought was quite interesting to have come from the festival. So Hannah, you have to dwell on Channel 4, one of the 16. What have you gone for?
So among the 16 that particularly caught my eye was Outrageous Extensions from Avalon, which is actually Tiny Temper, the popular artist, is fronting a kind of Grand Designs-esque property show, but it's all based on extensions. And as someone that doesn't have any money to buy a house, the fact that people would spend between 500,000 and 1 million on an extension is mind-blowing. So I think that sounds quite fun. And also I just think, why not get him on to front it? It sounds really fun. He's got like a backstory as well. Like he's got his own property portfolio, so it doesn't feel quite as random as just bringing somebody in onto a show, which I always think is really important when they do these kind of getting talent for different shows. Like you kind of have to have a connection, otherwise it just looks a bit weird and doesn't work. So that sounds quite fun. The other one from Channel 4, don't judge me, but I'm quite intrigued by, is and it sounds just like a kind of ordinary E4 format. It's about thruples, the love triangle. It's from Naked, and for some reason, but it's like a dating show, but it's like couples trying to get their third person involved for a throuple, but it's a dating show, and I'm like, why not? It's fun. It's E4y. I'm here for it. Let's see where it goes.
Love it. I feel like if anything can persuade the government not to sell Channel 4, it's a tiny temper property show and an E4 show about thruples, right?
Exactly.
We're done.
Exactly.
That's good. If it's close, then those are the things that are going to just like slightly push it over the line.
Yeah. Take that, John Whittingdale.
John Elms, you were also looking into some Channel 4 shows, but for you, it was a drama that really caught your eye.
Well, actually, it is a Channel 4 show, but I'm quite curious to hear about thruples now. I think that's an interesting part of the dating world that has clearly not got its fair break on TV. So I'll definitely be tuning into that. I know it seems easy for me to pick a Channel 4 commission, but as Hannah and you, Max, and we've pointed out, they did seem to commission everything during Edinburgh. So it's not surprising that I've gone for a Channel 4 one. But basically, the one I picked is a 2-year realization of a story that we wrote, which Broadcast broke in 2019, about the adaptation of Candice Carty-Williams' hit novel Queenie. It's been turned into a half-hour drama. The book is a fantastic and really popular novel, and it's been in development for a while, and I've been kind of waiting for it to greenlit and hoping that it was going to be done. And Carty-Williams, whose novel writing is her writing style is really funny and irreverent, but also cuts through with a lot of important topics about contemporary Britain, is adapting her own work for the screen. So I think that's going to be a really good drama, and something that actually does fulfill what I think Channel 4 does really well, which is hit the nub of parts of British society that we need to showcase on screen. So I'm really looking forward to Queenie. All hail Queenie.
A more serious reason to not privatise Channel 4 than
Absolutely.
the aforementioned thruples and tiny temper.
Yeah, I feel like in true Newswrap style, I can never seem to pick a serious show ever. I'm like, I can't think the last time I said something that was genuinely serious.
Good stuff. Well, I'm not going to pick a Channel 4 show because we don't want to go over the top. But Netflix unveiled not one, not two, but 3 reality TV shows, which I like. I like the sound of a couple of them. One of which is called Snowflake Mountain. It's also produced by Naked. And it's following a group of young adults who aren't yet living to their full potential, heading to a wilderness survival retreat to shed their pampered backgrounds. I like all of the sound of that. I'm quite a big fan of Netflix reality shows. I also like how the press release detailed that they're not yet living up to their full potential. Like, by what definition are they not doing that? I can't wait to see all these losers go up a mountain and stop being so pampered. So I thought that's going to be really good. And on a more serious note, once again showing Netflix's unscripted play. Like, this isn't just one show every couple of years. Like, this is now 3 different UK indies being commissioned for big shows. So I'll be watching that, and I thought that sounded really good.
They've done a casting call yet.
We should all go. None of us are living up to our full potential. We should
exactly. Go. I'm like, how do I apply?
On that note, we're all off to join the cast of Snowflake Mountain. But it's been absolutely wonderful to have the 2 of you on. It's been wonderful to speak to Georgia Brown earlier, and we are back. The news wrap is here. So thank you all for coming.
And thanks for another great Edinburgh, guys. It's always a team spirit, and we've done another one. Congrats to us.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcast Newswrap. I'm Max Goldbart, and you've been listening to Georgia Brown and my colleagues John Elms and Hannah Bowler. You can check out all 54 past episodes of the pod on Spotify, iTunes, or on the website at www.broadcastnow.co.uk.